Let's Get To presents
5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Go, go, Astros! Here come the Astros, burning with desire. Here come the Astros, breathing orange fire. Here come the Astros, with winning on their mind. Here come the Astros, #1 every time. Go, go, Astros! We want Houston! Alvarez hits a high drive, center field. Veer leans back. This game is turned upside down.
And the pitch is lifted to right by Castellanos. Long run for Tucker over toward the line and foul territory. Makes the catch, and the Houston Astros do it again. 2022 World Series champions.
And now, Go Astros. Astros baseball from three guys who've been there since Art Howe had hair.
Here come the Astros, breathing orange fire. Here come the Astros.
Good morning, Astros fans. It is Tuesday, not Monday. We had a brief scheduling thing, but that allowed us to to learn two important things yesterday. One is the Astros are capable of scoring 11 runs, particularly in Canada, and with the exchange rate, I think that means that's worth 14 runs. And then, gentlemen, I spent a good portion of the weekend enjoying college baseball, and my LSU Tigers, despite some rain and lightning delays, advanced to the Super Regional. James, how did the Longhorns do?
Also advanced to Super Regional, ended up sweeping their regional in somewhat dominant fashion.
They have a guy named LeBaron Johnson who that's a really cool first name.
Yeah, and he did nothing except for just all of a sudden throw a 130-pitch complete game, one run, which I think set the tone for the whole regional for the Longhorns. But it's a tough matchup this weekend for sure.
Indeed. They will be playing Andy. Will they be playing A&M? They were matched up together.
No, they will not, but thank you for that, since I know you already know the answer to the question you were just asking.
So.
That's gotcha journalism, Brian.
Texas will be traveling to Stanford, who eliminated A&M in the, I don't know, the fourth game. It felt like they played 38 games. I will tell you this, for watching a bunch of college baseball this weekend and watching MLB, if I was iffy about the pitch clock and the pace of play, going back to college baseball really reminds you why Major League Baseball made that change, because A&M and Stanford were two teams that take a lot of pitches and have a lot of pitching changes, and those games felt like they were 5-6 hours long. It didn't help that it started at 8 o'clock at night on the West Coast, but good job, MLB. Maybe you made a good decision for once.
Hey, we should, as much as we criticize Major League Baseball and as much as they earn it, the pitch clock has really seemed to work well. Andy's right, and it's something we should, they deserve a little credit here, and then we can go back to being honest about them.
Just a little.
Just a little. Our baseball team is really good. They won 3 of 4 against the Angels. They crushed the Blue Jays last night. They keep winning, and maybe the offense is coming around. Is it okay for me to say that, James?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, first of all, I put on this old school Astros shirt to remind us of what happens when you used to hit a home run in the dome, because there were a lot of home runs yesterday. But more importantly, it looks like Bregman's getting back to some degree of consistency. And I don't know about you guys, but to me, it makes, now that Abreu's down in the lineup, it makes me stomach his, although I think he has increased his production, it's a little less annoying because it's a little less important. And obviously not having Altuve for 2 or 3 games was a bummer, though I don't know that it affected much. But yeah, I mean, looking what Bregman did, looking what, of course, Alvarez wakes up in the morning with a cold and hits home runs, but it looks like it's starting to heat up in June, as I think Andy predicted.
I don't predict things. I just look at trends. And then I don't understand them because I'm not a numbers guy. So, to follow up on that, yeah, I think the offense is getting better. And I know we have this ongoing, maybe inside joke at this point, maybe it's outside, about lineup construction not mattering. But moving Abreu to the 6th spot in the lineup and putting Bregman in the cleanup spot has increased offensive output. And I think you look at whether there is a way to calculate it or not, there are certain guys who can drive in runs when there are opportunities to do so, and there are certain guys who just can't for whatever reason. This year, Abreu can't seem to do that. Bregman has this past week. In fact, he had 9 RBI, and the Astros scored a lot of runs this week. Except for that one game where we evidently had to DFA Phil Maton, because that nobody player, what his name, Shohei something Otani, doubled and won a game for them. I don't know how we allowed that to happen, but I'm glad we got rid of that bum Phil.
He boosted his ERA to 9.8. Whoa.
I mean, just horrible performance. No, it's been a good week for the Astros. The offense is coming around, and what's most encouraging for me is your 7, 8, 9 hitters are producing at a reasonable clip. Not not world beaters or anything, but you're getting offensive production from Chas McCormick. You're getting offensive production from Jake Myers, who we fixed on this show. I'm still taking credit for that. And you get the occasional surprise from Corey Julks. And I know that the Corey Julks fans who watch this show are going to be angry with me, but still not a Major League Baseball player.
Yeah, that's actually one of the questions I wanted to get into, is sort of looking at the job share arrangement in the outfield. Kyle Tucker starts every day, but it's not a platoon because they're all right-handed, and I don't think there's a clear sort of pattern of the type of pitcher they're going against, but there's a clear job share between Jake Myers, Chas McCormick, and Corey Julks. Julks, I think, gets a tiny bit less of the playing time, but not a clear less of the playing time. Worked out real well last night when both Julks and Myers homered. Thanks, guys, for setting up the segment very well.
You're welcome.
But then, Chas has had a really good week here. Chas has gone from below average to above average in his batting over the season, with a hot streak. But that's very similar to what we've seen from guys like, some other guys as well. Andy, you sort of expressed that Julks is playing too much. James, what do you think? Would you like to see continued sort of even share of those two, or?
Well, no. I honestly think right now, sitting here, my offense, my defensive alignment would be Chas in left, Jake in center, and then Kyle in right, leaving Jordan to DH and sit in bubble wrap when he's not DHing. But look, I actually like Corey Julks. I don't know that he's not a Major League Baseball player, but I also believe it's, particularly at this point in the season, consistent ABs for your guys that are going to be who you think are going to be the ones you rely on, I think are important. Now, I would basically switch the timeshare a bit more in the favor of Chas and Jake Myers, and maybe not as much as Corey Julks, using him to, DH here and there, spot start. So he keeps enough ABs, but he's getting more ABs than Diaz, and I know that's going to be a topic, and I don't think that's right. So I think that we're giving the wrong ABs to the wrong guys. I understand it's different positions and whatnot, but just to show you that Dusty's got this weird perspective where we have the offense as a whole is produced for most of the year, and yet we're playing round robin and the first base spot hasn't. So I wouldn't switch it. I would lean it more Chas and Jake Myers.
If I could, I'd like to offer a little correction. I don't think that we played Corey Julks too much because I don't know what the better options are at this point. But one of the eternal questions that happens on Astros Twitter is when Michael Brantley comes back. But when Michael Brantley comes back, who's getting replaced or who's getting moved back to the minor leagues? That's going to be Corey Julks if you're replacing an outfielder with an outfielder. He is a guy who has an 11.25 to 1 strikeout to walk ratio. That's not good, and it hadn't exactly gotten better over the course of the season. And that is the player Corey Julks was in spring training and before spring training. Yeah. He was the 30th ranked prospect in the Astros organization, which is not a well thought of organization from the minor league standpoint. He has a lot of power, which we saw last night with a grand slam. He's got 5 home runs, but he does not walk, and he strikes out a ton. And that is not the profile of who the Astros typically play. If they had a better option, I still posit they'd play him over Corey Julks, but that is who you have right now. Having said all that, that's probably where you try to upgrade too when we start talking about trades and other things that I think we're going to hit on a little bit. But I will applaud Dusty for this. Whatever he's doing with the lineup and getting past some of his stubbornness with Abreu in the cleanup spot, it's working. Moving Pena back to 2 is working. Putting Bregman at cleanup is working. Putting Abreu in a less important spot in the lineup is working. So those things combined with the fact that Altuve has come back, Alvarez is Alvarez, and Bregman has gotten hot, has made this a much more enjoyable team to watch over the last 14 days or so.
Pena at 2, and I know that there's the whole lineup construction is a debate, but the Astros play better when he hits second. They did it in the playoffs. They've done it this year, and I think that needs to be the lineup. And even if Brantley does come back, I don't think you slide him right into 2 until you see whether or not he can still hit major league pitching. So I think that's worked. I think having Alvarez and Tucker has not nearly been the handicap that Dusty thinks. So I agree.
Yeah, I mean, we'll cross the when Michael Brantley gets back bridge when it happens, which yes,
unless his career's crossed the rainbow bridge, and then we won't.
Yes, indeed.
Lots of prayers.
Lots of prayers.
Yeah, which anyway. But yeah, I mean, Andy brings up the most important point about Julks, which is he has 4 walks on the season.
Yeah,
and sometimes he can take a pitch out of the strike zone like he did yesterday. And if he can get his barrel to it, it goes a long way. I mean, because his carrying skill, his power, seems to be an average defensive outfielder. He doesn't seem to be a liability out there. He has some assets, but notable about Corey Julks is that he was exposed to the Rule 5 draft this offseason. And no other team said, I mean, the A's could have said, I'll just throw this guy on the roster and see if he's something. Part of that is he's a little older. I think he's 27, 28, so he's not a young prospect. But you have defensive advantages when you have Chaz and Jake as your outfield. Jake is one of the handful of best defensive center fielders in Major League Baseball, and I'm not sure Astros fans appreciate that enough. So it seems their advantage the other ways. On the other hand, again, it's working. So these are, probably minor complaints. Another thing we get to complain about is the pitching rotation. The Astros have gone to a 6-man rotation by bringing up Ronel Blanco. And there are 2 notes about this. One is Ronel Blanco, maybe not the biggest prospect in the world, and he's even older than Corey Julks. He's 29, so his future is even more sort of limited.
Ancient.
But the future is right, yeah. The oldest player ever sort of involved here. I'm going to get my ARP card out in a second here. The other thing is they have an off day coming up on Monday, I believe, and then they play 9 straight. Thoughts on staying in the 6-man rotation? Thoughts about going back to the 5-man rotation? James, I'll start with you.
I'm very much torn on it. Obviously the 6-man rotation looked so much better last year. But I think if you get the kind of performances you got out of, in particular, Bielak yesterday and France the day before, where you can limit bullpen exposure, then I like the 6-man rotation. Andy and I were talking offline about just how tired this bullpen was, and all of a sudden they pretty much got 2 days off. Mm-hmm. So you can't, even though France, we didn't get him the run support he needed. The fact is he did his job. He spared the bullpen. I like the 6-man rotation, at least for maybe through this end of this next 9-game stretch. But I think after that, it looks like we start having more regular days off, and then I would definitely go back to the 5-man at that point.
Andy?
To Jim's point, it looked better last year because our pitching members of that rotation looked better last year.
We had fewer. we had less of the Sugarland rotation in the Minute Maid rotation.
And so if you're replacing it, nothing against JP France, but you've replaced Justin Verlander with JP France. I don't know that JP France's mother would take that trade. It's fine for right now. I kind of think we're at the same kind of precipice as 20, 30 years ago when people were moving from a 4-man rotation to a 5-man rotation. I think the six-man rotation is ultimately going to be more normal than it is currently in Major League Baseball, because I think you develop fewer pitchers who can go longer. There's
Yeah.
there's a trade-off to that though, and we're seeing that over the last week really, where we've all kind of wondered out loud what's going on with the bullpen. The bullpen's tired because you've got a bunch of starters who aren't named Framber or Valdez who go 5 innings, maybe they get to the sixth, and then you've got a lot put on your bullpen shoulders. And when you have no off days in that and a lot of heavy usage, you're going to get tired bullpens and shaky performances. We avoided that to a great extent last year. Christian Javier needs to go farther in games. I still think Javier and Valdez are as good a 1-2 as you're going to find in baseball, but Javier puts a undue burden on the bullpen a lot of times because it's very rare that he goes past 6 innings. Hunter Brown needs to continue his development. Those three, I think you're lined up well for a playoff series. But when you get to a regular season, you do have to give starts to J.P. France and Brandon Belak and Ronel Blanco. And ultimately, those guys are people you can improve upon, whether it's an internal candidate, if we think Lance McCullers Jr. is coming back. Jose Urquidy's going to come back, and he, for whatever his faults are, can eat innings. And then there's going to be a potential and probably a need to trade for a starter who at least profiles as a number 3. But right now it suits the purposes, and I see more teams going to it in the future. The downside is that it puts a bigger burden on your bullpen, especially when you have 17 games in a row and then 9 in a row after that. So we're seeing kind of the results of that. Blanco hasn't disappointed me, and his ERA for the season is largely reflective of his ineffective bullpen starts or bullpen appearances earlier in the year. I will say J.P. France and Brandon Belak, anybody looking at just the record, is missing the story because they are pitching with a lot of luck, but they are getting the job done. Even Belak gave up 9 hits yesterday. Some of that Dusty leaves him in a little bit too long, I think, but it's he's doing what he has to do even with runners on base. So it's an area to improve, but right now it's working for what the Astros, and honestly there aren't a whole lot of options, so I'm glad it's working.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, good news for Belak, 1 walk yesterday. Bad news, only 2 strikeouts, and he definitely was left in. But that was part of the strategy of being up so big. And again, we need an extra inning, and we got a couple outs from Belak, which was big for the bullpen. And we've gotten 13 2/3 in the last 2 games from France and Belak, from the part of the rotation where you're more worried about that. The vulnerabilities we've talked about of having the 6-man rotation is you have 1 less arm in the bullpen. And what they were able to do last year pretty successfully is just get consistently starts of 5, 6, 7 innings, so that even though they had 1 less arm in the bullpen than other teams, they didn't need it because they got so many innings from the starters. This year, they've gotten a few less innings from the starters, and again, it creates attention on the bullpen, though not in its performance, which has been excellent. So it's one of those worries is real. The long-term thing matters. The other thing to sort of note here is with the 6-man rotation, if one of them goes down, there is nobody else in the organization.
No, you're looking at Corpus Christi starters at this point.
Yeah,
probably none of those guys are targeted to be major league starters this year or next year.
Yeah.
So it's
Though to be fair, J.P. France was not on anybody's radar. I mean, they are still. I know it's like Russian roulette, but they still are continuing to make something out of nothing. So,
well, and I will say this for J.P. France, his underlying numbers, and I know his FIP is high, but his WHIP is down to 1.15, which is not bad for a major league starter by any means. His average against is 231, which could be better but could be worse. The guy really living on borrowed time or playing with a lot of fire is Brandon Belak. Last night, his WHIP is 1.49. His batting average against is 2.91. He pitches with a lot of traffic, but at some point those hits are going to start falling in at the wrong time. good for Brandon. And I got nothing against him, but if you're looking for a place where you need to replace, that's gonna have to be a main focus for Dana Brown in the front office when we're looking at the trade deadline coming up in about 2 months, a little less.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And speaking of this sort of looking ahead, um, how good are the Rangers? And or more, I guess the better question is, how long can they keep this up? In particular, the Rangers bashed the Mariners this weekend, and the Rangers have a really impressive set of offensive numbers so far. We expected the offense to be the strength of that team because they spent a lot of money there and had some younger players there, but it's far exceeded what we've expected here. How long can the Rangers keep that up? And is the answer 162 games? Andy, I'll start with you.
Uh, the Rangers are a very good team offensively, and they've constructed in such a way that I think that some of their players can maintain. I find it hard to believe that their entire roster can stay over 800 OPS for the bulk of a season. And we've got roughly 100 games left in the year. So I do expect some fall off, but we have looked for the last, really since the pandemic season, for a team that's going to stay with us and challenge the Astros all year, or the Astros are going to have to chase, however you want to look at it. And Seattle fell short. The Angels have always been the Angels. I think the Rangers are built, especially with Corey Seager and Semien at the top of their lineup. Seager when he's healthy, to really maintain. They hit with a lot of power. They score a lot of runs. I think the biggest difference between them last year and this year is Bruce Bochy. And I know that is not a quantifiable thing that you can measure, but he is a manager who knows how to win baseball games. And right now, they're doing that, and they're doing that at kind of a ridiculous clip. I don't have their differential in front of me, but as a team, they are trailing only Tampa Bay in team OPS. They're getting on base at a 345 clip as a team, which I think is highest in the majors, slugging just a little bit under what Tampa's doing. They give up more runs than the Astros. They but they score a lot more runs than the Astros. And so it's going to depend. I still ultimately think, and yes, I'm biased, I still ultimately think the Astros catch them and pass them up because I think their pitching is not as good as it's performed so far. And I think the Astros have a lot of runway to get better, if that makes any sense. But it's going to be an interesting summer, especially to see what happens with the trade deadline, because frankly the Rangers have a lot more pieces to deal with if they want to get creative and get aggressive in the trade market than the Astros do. So having said all that, I like the Astros experience. I like the fact that our offense honestly hasn't performed that well up until the last couple of weeks and has a lot of room to grow. And we've got room, under the salary cap to go get a frontline pitcher and to go get a left fielder, first base option, however that ends up looking. But I think the Rangers are legit, and I think they're, dismissing them out of hand. They're certainly going to make the playoffs. It would be very difficult for them at this point not to make the playoffs, barring some ridiculous losing streak, and I don't see them going on that. I think Bochy and Mike Maddox especially have been big differences for that organization and kind of gotten them back to winning baseball games and not trying to develop players on the field.
James.
I think it's 11:45 p.m. in Arlington, and I think midnight will strike, and Cinderella will go back to being the little peasant girl she believes she should be without the happy ending. No, look, I mean, honestly, the way the Rangers have been winning games, it seems unrealistic to maintain it, because I think it is unrealistic to maintain what they're doing. They just put DeGrom on the 60-day IL, which I'm sure, and I think they're redoing the MRI on his elbow. I think when you talk about a pitching staff that's duct taped together, there's a sort of duct tape together, and you have players kind of playing over their skis. I don't know how long that's going to last. The other thing too is I go back to looking at strength of schedule, and right now the Rangers have the third hardest strength of schedule remaining in baseball. The Astros have the 18th. And I think that matches up. I think you can look at the Rangers. The Astros have already played Tampa Bay and Atlanta and won 5 of those 6 games. The Rangers played Atlanta and lost the series. And I know that you can't do those apples to apples comparisons like that, but it does seem to me that when when the Rangers are playing anybody that's not a doormat in baseball, they struggle. And if only the Cardinals could pitch a little bit.
Which is what Cardinals fans and what Scott's been saying all season, right?
Yeah.
So, yeah, I mean, it's a very classic matchup here of the best run scoring team in the American League versus the best run prevention team in the American League in the Astros. But the Astros run prevention seems more sustainable to me than the Rangers being this good on offense. The Rangers are getting they're getting quality production from Marcus Semien. I've heard that before from Corey Seager when he's healthy. But they've got guys who apparently Jonah Heim is the best hitting catcher in baseball. That may not last. Travis Jankowski is hitting like he's at the Baton Rouge Super Regional again. Not that I'm past that from 12 years ago, but still another college baseball reference to ward off my fellow LSU fans from the rest of the show. There are a couple sort of things I look at and go like, I'm not sure they sort of sustain themselves here. Other advantage the Astros have is at manager because even though they both have won a lot of games, Dusty Baker's career winning percentage, 540. And I know you love Bruce Bochy, Andy, but his career winning percentage, 499. He is a below 500 manager in the regular season. If we can get Tim Lincecum and Matt Cain in his rotation this October, I'm very scared. But
to be fair, I don't love Bruce Bochy. I have, a matter of fact, I'm irritated with him from his time at the Astros in the early '80s. But I will say he is a dramatic improvement over Chris Woodward. And I think for the last couple of years, the Rangers have not necessarily been trying to win games as much as they've been trying to score runs and develop players at the major league level versus trying to develop them at AA and AAA. I think what you're seeing now is an impetus on winning, which is a little bit because they are doing things that honestly Dusty Baker gets criticized for not doing. They are pinch hitting in 10-run lead games to try to score a 12th run. They're doing a lot of things to, I think, jigger their stats a little bit to make it look that they're even better than they're performing. But I think Bochy brings a better attitude than Chris Woodward brought to that team. And I think that goes a long way, even though if you can't quantify it, because I think ultimately the quantification of that is the record.
Yeah. I will say this, though. Bruce Bochy has got a very much of an old man gait when he walks out to the mound. He's a couple years younger than Dusty, but he's definitely beating Dusty on the senior citizen walk. And Dusty's got an impressive senior citizen walk of his own. But
I just think, I also don't think the Astros offense, it has been surprisingly underperforming. And I don't think that stays. Like, I honestly think that they have the ability to produce runs at the same clip, at the same pace that the Rangers do. They've just underperformed all season. We're starting to see some of that underperformance wear off. And I do not believe that if Abreu has not turned it around by the All-Star break, I do not believe he'll be the starting first baseman. So I think the Astros had a slow start due to the fact that they played the most games in baseball over the past 6 years. And I think are finally starting to put things together. The Astros that are playing now are not the same team that lost 2 or 3 to the Rangers. They just aren't.
Well, let's hope so, because I went to all 3 games of those series, and baseball part was not the best part of that weekend. But anyway, we've had a week, so we need to do players of the week, and we can't all say Altuve this time like we did last week. So, James, I'll start with you.
Do you have to? Yes, I have my notes typed up. Now I'm going to go to them. And I'm very excited about stalling just a little bit so I can find those notes.
Sir, do you need a little bit longer to make your order? Or we can start at the other end of the table.
Yeah, if you want to go ahead and do that. Yeah, go ahead. Yeah, I said Alec. I said, yeah, go ahead, Andy.
Well, I think you're about to take the one I was going to take, so I'll take my backup. Astros fans have been clamoring all year for this to actually happen, but this week, Yainer Diaz played 2 games in a row, which is the first time that's happened since games 1 and 2. And he responded with a 1.785 OPS for the last 7 days. That includes 2 home runs, 3 doubles, 1 strikeout, which is a giant improvement for the free swinging first baseman / catcher. But he's getting on base at a 571 clip, which it's hard to have a 1.7 something OPS without getting on base at a 500 clip. But 8 hits and looking very competent at the plate. He's still a free swinger. He's still going to drive you nuts with his zone protection. And yesterday was, a 4-hit game for him, which certainly drives up these numbers a lot. But he's a guy that is pushing for more playing time, and whether that's at first base, whether that's at catcher, I still don't see him being a left field option, and I'm not sure where that came from earlier in the year. He needs to play more than once every 7 days, which has kind of been the norm, unfortunately, for Dusty. So I hope he's hitting his way into getting more playing time, but he's my player of the week this week, and Astros Twitter has been saying he's the player of the week since the beginning of the year, so I guess I'm finally caught up.
I'm gonna do that is an alligator chomp thing. Is that what we're doing? I'm gonna go with Chazzy. I'll go with Chas McCormick. Last week, 3 home runs, 5 RBI. I mean, he's just what I like about him is his ability to, even if he doesn't play for a couple of days, to come out and contribute. And there's been this Jake Myers, Chas McCormick thing all season. I'm still team Chas for I think that very reason, though. Both him and Jake made excellent defensive plays in the field, but I got a thing for Chas, and that sounds weird. I have a thing for Chas. So, I think Chas McCormick is my player of the week.
Apologies to Jessica, but you have a thing for Chas.
Please don't.
Start calling you Buffy with your thing for Chas. Are you going to the Kappa Alpha Mixer later?
I am going to the – no.
And I'm going to go to the top of the rotation. I'm taking Fromber, who kicked off the really good sort of pitching here with, one of his possibly best games of the season. 7 innings, 7 strikeouts, only 1 walk, and for the second time this season, defeated Shohei Ohtani. Yes, Fromber better than Shohei Ohtani. Apologies to all our Japanese viewers and listeners.
We do have some, actually. Isn't that weird?
And
we do chart well in Japan and Australia.
We're big in Japan.
We're very big.
Oh, wow. Well, we're all from the 80s, so that song works.
Yes.
Probably should throw out some honorable mention to Alex Bregman, too, because he, much maligned earlier in the year and is starting to get really, really hot to the point of almost an 1,100 OPS over the last 7 days, right at 1,000 over the last 15 days, is hitting with power, but as we mentioned earlier, driving in a lot of runs. So moving him to the cleanup spot, if you've got to pick one thing that's picked the offense up, his ability to get people on base to home from his at-bats has been a big deal for the Astros over the last couple of weeks.
And let me advertise for my Substack here by noting that on May 7th, I wrote an article titled "Alex Bregman Will Be Fine." So if you'd like to know what's coming in the Astros, orangefire.substack.com.
So can we take credit for fixing Bregman and Myers?
I'm taking credit for Bregman. Okay. You get credit for Myers.
All right, so we'll be Bregman fixing adjacent.
So
yes, there you go. Yeah.
Good. All right. That gets close to wrapping us up here. Sort of final thoughts here. Andy, I'll start with you.
I'm going to skip the game tonight because we scored 12 runs last night, and Lord knows we're not going to hit anything today. Sorry for Ronell and his start, but the rest of the week looks good for the Astros, so go Stros.
But just another programming note, we do have an episode of Let's Get To coming out little bit after this. We're talking June 6th. It's important in history. and our Blue Ghost coverage. And if you're going to be on the road, we will be in Evansville, Indiana, Du Bois County, Indiana, and then the Rocket City Trash Pandas this weekend. So come say hi if you're there.
And it is June, so it is Pride Month. And last night, Yainer Diaz hit a double, and Jake Myers hit a home run off of Anthony Bass, and it filled me, and I think lots of other people, with a great deal of pride. Go Astros.